Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Curtain. I'm your host, Lauren Shippey, and today we're talking about self sabotage. And when this list of things came to me for Behind the Curtain, I thought about all the things that I have seen leaders and clients walk through, and I've also thought about the things that have held me back from continuing to build the things that I believe in moving forward. And so I thought, well, if I can just speak to those things, maybe it would help someone or multiple people, hopefully, in their journey to create and build new things or continue the building process. Because we know sometimes in the building process, we can get tired. We can get tired in the middle. We can doubt, right? We talked about doubt, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that coming up here. And we can lose focus, we can get distracted. There's lots of things that can happen along the winding road, right? But self-sabotage is one of those things, and it really comes as a result of our inability to see who we really are. So when I got thinking about self-sabotage, we think about it as like, I experience self-sabotage when I go to do something and I get 80 to 90% of the way, and then I don't finish that last 10 to 20%. I just stop. I get tired. I think of something else I have to do, and it never gets done. Why is that? Well, because there's something under it. There's fear, or there's doubt, or there's imposter syndrome, or all the other things we're talking about. But the root of it is we forget to see who we really are. We let other things in, like our own negative voice, or we think about others' criticism. Can you think of the voices that you typically hear in your head that are voices of doubt or criticism? Oftentimes they come from family members, friends, they can even be close friends. And so we have to parse out the truth in those voices versus the lies. Now, there can be some feedback from it that can be valuable. Like I remember I was recording with Craig Cooney from Daily Prophetic here, and it was so great because he was talking about, how these ladies gave him some feedback about his teaching and the fact that he spoke about a particular topic so many times, like too many times, and he thought, you know what? They had a point, right? Sometimes when people give us criticism, it can hurt, it stings. And that tape can play over and over and over again on repeat in our minds throughout our lives at different moments, sometimes quietly and sometimes really loudly. But I think the key to cracking this code is stopping when we get the criticism or feedback and saying, what was this person's intention or heart motive in sharing this? What place did it come from? Now, sometimes you're going to say that actually came from a place of bitterness or jealousy or defensiveness, or maybe their prior wounds with something or someone else. And you can discern that and say, okay, you know what? That's not something that I have to take in because it's not actually accurate. But then you're going to have times where, you're going to see that their intentions were good, but maybe it just came out wrong. Like maybe they just didn't say it well and it came out clumsily, right? And so you can look at it objectively and say, okay, you know what? It came out kind of weird. I was kind of offended or hurt by it, but I think there's some truth in there. I think there's some value that I can take back and adjust. And then there may be times where someone comes to you wholeheartedly, is the word that comes to mind, and they are for you and they support you and they're with you, and you know that they're on your team and they're passionate about what they have to say and their feedback, and you can receive it and you can take it in and you can use it to better yourself, right? And your story. So I think it's really important to unpack others' criticism or feedback that we get and discern what type of criticism or feedback is this? What was the heart posture behind it? And how can I extract the gold, if you will, take the good parts of it and apply it? And then sometimes you just might get this criticism that you have to discard immediately. You just have to set it aside, throw it out, and move on with a clean slate. But don't move on without making sure that you clear your own heart and mind, which means forgive, release, and move on cleanly. Because if not, then we carry wounds and we carry bitterness or any kind of baggage with us as we continue on, and we don't want to do that. So, just wanted to stop there for a second and talk about that because I think it's a really important part of where we can get stuck in terms of self sabotage. I also think our own negative voice, is worth parsing out. So, where is that belief coming from? The thing that you're telling yourself, I'll never finish this. I don't have the resources. I don't have the people. I can't really do this. Like, who am I to do this? Imposter syndrome, all those things. I want you to think about that. And I want you to go through it and actually see if it has any credibility or validity. Because a lot of times these things play in our subconscious mind and they stop us from moving forward. And they're allowed to exist because they exist in our subconscious. We haven't called it to the front, written it out, right? Like actually write it out and look at it and ask a trusted friend, is this true? Like, do I have any business doing this? And get feedback on it if you need an objective opinion. So, what happens with self sabotage is that things like a negative voice or others' criticism can play over and over in our minds, and we can get to that 70, 80, 90% and then give up. We can set ourselves up to give up, to stop trying, to quit before it's over, to walk away before we're left. This can also play out in relationships for fear of being rejected. If we launch that new thing, nobody might show up, nobody might buy it. If we put ourselves out there in terms of a relationship, they might not want to partner with us, right? They might not want to have a part in whatever it is that we're doing. So we figure this is where self sabotage gets sticky. If we can move on, if we can move quick enough, then we won't have to experience pain. So that's really self protection, is what we're talking about. And that keeps us in a cycle of self sabotage because we put our walls up and then we end up in our own prison. We've built our own prison. Think about how crazy this is. We've boxed ourselves in so we might feel safe, but our creativity, our generosity, and our capability to move leaves us. So we might feel comfort or a false safety in here, but we're also in a perpetual cycle of self sabotage because we're not finishing the good work that we set out to do, that we're created to do, because we set ourselves up for failure, because we don't really want to go the 100%, because it might be hard, it might be tiring, it might challenge us, right? We might have to push through these negative voices. It's like if you can picture walking on a tightrope and you were once focused. I want you to picture something that you did in your life that you were focused. You had the aim, you knew where you were going, you knew exactly what you were doing, you knew exactly what you were building, and you went after it. You were in your lane, and all of a sudden something happened that threw you off the tightrope. Either you looked down, or you tried to turn around and look back, or you looked to the side and you wobbled and you fell off that tightrope. You lost your balance. And maybe at this point, you've been off that tightrope for a while and you're comfortable here, but you have something burning in your heart and your mind, and you know you got to do this thing, but you don't want to get back on the tightrope because you're afraid, you're comfortable. It's great here. Why should I move? I know what I'm going to encounter. I know there's going to be resistance. I know I'm going to have to deal with those negative voices. I know I'm going to get pushback from X, Y, and Z, right? And you can't even remember what it feels like to be on the tightrope and be focused with your primary direction and aim and feel completely alive and moving in that zone. But I just want to remind you today that it's still in there. In there is someone who knows who they are and what they stand for and what they want to build. But the fogginess that you feel is actually that self sabotage loop, right? Because of fear or getting rejected, or actually even comfort. Comfort can really encourage us to continue the cycle of self sabotage because we're comfortable here. We don't have to. We don't have to do this. We'd be fine if we didn't. But may I challenge you, is that you operating in your purpose or your calling, using your gifts and talents and feeling truly alive with the work that you know that you're called to do within your family, within whatever that looks like, your movement, nonprofit, your business. So I want you to take yourself back to your default settings, like before all those roadblocks and barriers you encountered in your life, right? And you've probably taken a lot of hits throughout your life. That's normal. I mean, everyone has taken a lot of hits. Who were you? Who were you before any of it happened? And you might not even remember. Who have you always been? Like, what's always been true about you? That's what I ask people a lot in workshops and working with leaders. Like, who have you always been from the beginning? What's always been true about you before those negative voices entered in, before that criticism entered in, before you got knocked down and beat up a couple times? Who were you? Now go be that person, because the world needs it. The world needs you to be that person. And so I just want to encourage you today to actively push back against self sabotage. If it's comfort, if it's fear, if it's rejection, if it's criticism, whatever it is, I want you to take one small step toward actively pushing back against self sabotage for yourself. Because trust me, you will feel so much more alive than you have felt in a really long time when you do that. And so, if you want to think through this, where have you been practicing self sabotage? And what did you forget about who you are that's allowing you to continue to do that? And so, as you work through this, I think some of the things that are helpful is recognizing the sources and creating a path to put aside those influences. So, there may be a time where you might need to mute some voices, or you might need to just take a little step back for a little bit from some of those influences. Just be aware of who's around you and what they're speaking. Are they speaking life, or are they speaking death, right? I mean, the power of life and death is in the tongue. So we've got a lot of power in our words, in our phrases, in our tone of voice, in the way that we communicate with others. I would want to encourage you to be the person that speaks life to people and also receive that. And if there's a constant source of something that is not speaking life into you, then you've got to figure out a way to not include that as part of this thing that you're working on over here. Know the root. So reflect on the root cause, expose the invalid beliefs behind it. So, what's the root cause of the things that have created this loop of self sabotage in your life? Is it a belief that you're not good enough, that you don't have what it takes, that you're not important enough, that you don't have the resources, that you'll never be successful? You know, what is that belief and where did it come from? Because chances are it could be even a generational pattern. So think back to your parents, your grandparents, what you know to be true about your family line. Where have they always given up? Where have they always gotten this far and then stopped? Because, and why is that? Think about those generational lines and expose those invalid beliefs behind it. Because just because that was what the previous generation did does not mean that that's what you're going to do, right? Because you can make a choice to cut off that generational pattern and go a different way. You can go against the grain, which is one of our guides, and that's what we talk about. And I think that's a really important step, because a lot of the core patterns come from things that we've experienced in our family line. And so the third thing that I would encourage you to do is just recall who you've always been and what's always been true about you as you step back onto that tightrope and get focused and get your aim back and get your fire back that really reminds you of who you are. And so I want to end this episode with a declaration. And it says, I remember who I was before any of this happened. I'm going to go back to my factory settings in order to make room for the new things that are going to give me life again. I'm not going to prematurely destroy relationships, opportunities, or dreams. I'll give them all a fair shot as I remember who I've always been and operate according to it. Thanks so much for listening, and share this with a friend if you know they need to hear it, and we'll see you soon.